This is a clip showing the transfer speed of a file, and I'm comparing the Eero mesh with the TaoTronics mesh. Hey guys, today we're looking at the TaoTronics mesh Wi-Fi network. What we'll be looking at is speed, distance, and some features with the mesh network. I do want to point out that TaoTronics sent this to me to do a review because I think they love me, and actually I'm really happy they sent this to me. I've been really impressed with the mesh network so far. So let's start with speed. To test the speed out, I ran some tests from fast.com. I did about 20 tests during different times of the day. I do want to point out that I am on Xfinity's plan that does 100 megabits per second. So that's kind of the benchmark we should be using for this test. My top speed for this test was 120 megabits per second. And after running the test about 20 times, I got an average of around 109 megabits per second. That's pretty good considering I am on the 100 megabits per second plan. Another test that I did was I downloaded an ISO image of Ubuntu because it's a rather large file, and I transferred it from my computer, which is upstairs, down to my server, which is down in the basement, and they're on different mesh nodes or whatever you call it. The file itself is 2.7 gigabytes, and using the TaoTronics mesh network, it took me 1 minute and 34 seconds to do the entire transfer, so that averages out to be about 28 megabytes per second. For comparison, I did the same exact test with same file, same conditions with the Eero mesh network, and with the Eero it took me 5 minutes and 27 seconds, which is an average of about 8 megabytes per second. So just transferring a file using the TaoTronics versus the Eero, the TaoTronics performed about 3.5 times faster than the Eero. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about the speed for the TaoTronics mesh network. So to touch on distance real quick, I went outside and I sat here under my walnut tree, which is a pretty good distance from inside the house, and I ran a bunch of speed tests out here on my phone, and I was actually getting the same speeds as I was inside. So pretty happy about this as well. I didn't test it much beyond that because beyond that I'm outside of my home, and I would never use the Wi-Fi outside that distance. Anywhere inside my home I'm getting fantastic speeds, and it turns out outside my home I'm getting fantastic speeds as well. So again, really happy with the speeds, really happy with the range on this thing. Let's talk about the setup for a second. So it's really easy to set up. You just go to your phone's app store and you download the TT router app. Unfortunately, like most other mesh networks, this doesn't seem to have a way that you can manage this from your browser, but the app is pretty good, so we'll walk through that right now. The setup is really easy. You just plug in the mesh network and you follow the instructions on your phone. I didn't have any problems at all with this. Everything connected as expected. Once you're connected, it shows the devices that are connected to the mesh network. It kind of shows the speed and the info for each device. You can also use the app to set up a guest network if you want to segment your network, so that way you can allow other people on your network, but they can't access your shared files or Samba shares or anything like that. This also gives you options for parental controls, so you can find a device, put it in a group, and then you can restrict internet access to that device based on your parental controls that you set. Something that was pretty unique that I haven't seen with other mesh networks that the TaoTronics has is that you have radio settings. So this actually allows you to set the channel and band if you want to be very specific about how you have things set up. So that's pretty cool. You can also set optimizations and QoS. The app also allows you to run speed tests, set up VPN, set up a virtual server, and look at all the network stats. Another nice thing about the TaoTronics mesh network that I haven't really seen with other mesh networks is that there is a USB port, so you can plug in a hard drive and use that for a Samba share for network attached storage. I will mention that during my testing, I did try this mesh network out in bridge mode as well as DHCP mode. Both modes worked just fine. Right now I'm currently using it in bridge mode because I have my own switch that I use for DHCP reservations specifically. But good news, The TaoTronics mesh network actually allows you to do IP reservations. I've used a handful of mesh networks and I haven't seen this on any of the other mesh networks I've tried. I suspect there's probably other mesh networks that do this, but this is something that I have always wanted. And the fact that I'm using a switch for my DHCP reservations is simply because everything I used until this point did not give me that flexibility or that option. That being said, the static IP reservations on this don't seem to be all that fantastic, and I could never figure out how to release static IP reservation, so I'm going to continue to use my switch, but it is actually pretty cool that it has that option available. After having tested this out, my overall thoughts are that I'm really actually quite impressed with the TaoTronics mesh network. I'm getting really good speeds, distance. The features are better than I've seen on most other mesh networks. Really, the only negatives I can see about this, for one, it's pretty beefy. Like it's a pretty huge piece of hardware. That doesn't actually bother me all that much, but just something to be aware of. It is quite a bit bigger than some other mesh networks, but then again, it's also a little bit smaller than others that I have seen. The only other real negative I'd say about this is because it's not a super well-known brand. Like I've gone on Google and looked for a few things on it, and you just don't find a lot of help or support that you would for other mesh networks. So that's something to be aware of. If you feel like you're probably going to need help or something like that, or you want to get really deep into the advanced features, you're probably going to be on your own figuring out how to do this. That being said, it looks like there are regular firmware updates with this mesh network. I've already gone through some firmware updates, so that's really nice that they are still doing some active development on this and always continually improving it. The things I really like about this mesh network that I haven't seen with other mesh networks in this price range is that, for one, it has 3 LAN ports. That's really nice. For me, this is really important because I have my modem on my main floor, but I run all my server equipment in my basement. I have to use the mesh network to connect the two so that I can have everything running smoothly. I also really like that it has a USB port for NAS, and it is pretty cool that it can do IP reservations, even though I'm not really a fan of how the app handles how to do this, but maybe I just don't know how to use the app. So far, I haven't had any issues with stability. Again, I've been really happy with this mesh network. Speed and distance is great. No issues. Let me know if you have any questions about it. Thanks again to TaoTronics for sending it to me. I think I've officially given up on my other mesh networks. I'm going to continue to use this one because I'm really happy with the speeds for this. So, cheers.